Good morning, guys. Good to see you again. I got to thank you for all the nice letters I've been receiving from so many of you. Glad to see me back doing seminars again. Well, I'm glad I'm back myself. It's kind of fun to do this. Hoping to do some more of these up in the woods here soon. John and I, we've put out cameras recently, and we're anxious to get up there and see what we got on our cameras. And we'll probably have lots to talk about then. But meanwhile, I had a subject I was going to talk about today, but my dog convinced me to talk about a different one last night. I moved recently to an apartment building out in the country for old people, old retired people. And being 88, I'm probably the oldest one in the building, a big 3-story apartment building. And we have a dog park there, and all the dogs that live in this apartment building are required to do their duty out there in that fenced-in dog park. Now, last night when I took Harvey out there in the evening to do his duty, first thing he wanted to do is wander around all over in this fenced area, and he's sniffing the ground. Sniff here and sniff there, and he's walking along, and oh, there's something there. It's kind of interesting. That dog park has become a dog newspaper. It provides news to all the dogs that live in the building. And because they're getting used to using that, they're now recognizing each other by their individual odors. And probably other things as well out there in the grass, but it's really interesting the way they're just drawn to go around sniffing all these different odors of these different dogs, and it's important to them. Well, white-tailed deer do the same thing, and almost every other animal who lives in the woods. They all live in specific areas. They're home ranges. Red squirrels might have a home range that's only about the size of a half a city block, and some animals have bigger home ranges, like a male black bear. He might have a home range as large as 30 square miles. So there's a lot of difference in size of the home ranges, but they keep track of one another, of their own kind and others. And they keep track of humans as well, hunters. During hunting seasons, our airborne odors and our tracks and our trail scents that we leave behind and all the changes we make in the woods, they're keeping track of all these things during hunting seasons. And the older deer, especially the ones that have survived 3 or 4 or more hunting seasons, up to 6 of them, they're smart deer. They've survived that long. And in almost every square mile in the United States of suitable whitetail habitat, there's a big buck. And then maybe 2 or 3 others that aren't quite so big. But as hunters hardly ever see them. Some of those bucks live an entire life without being seen by hunters. But they're there because those of us who read deer signs, to understand deer signs, we can say, look at there. There's tracks made by that big buck that lives in this area, the one we've never seen. They're 4 inches long. There's a puddle of droppings, deer droppings, and they're shiny, they're fresh, and they're an inch long. Or a little longer. That's that big buck again. He's been here. What's kind of sad about deer hunting is that so many of us don't take advantage of all the information that's provided by deer signs in deer hunting. My sons and I have been doing it for a long time, and we've been well rewarded for it. We've taken well over 100 mature bucks in the last, since 1990, just by being able to recognize and understand information provided by deer signs. But there's more to it than that. So what I'm talking about today is just some basic things. I can't teach you. There are so many deer signs Actually, you can put together combinations that mean this and that. There's more than 100 different combinations and things to know about deer signs and where they are. And I don't think there's another book, I know I haven't written another book that covers this particular subject better than this particular book. Well, this is my Whitetail Hunter's Almanac 4th edition. Let me just read a little bit of what I wrote in here. The many years of research that went into the making of this book have been filled with wonder and enchantment. Really, I'm not just making that up. I cannot discount the awe of seeing magnificent antlered titans locked in battle, the fascination of observing rarely seen behavior among unsuspecting deer in dappled sunlight as a totally harmless creature by a wild buck with 9-month absence. But this time, there's more. Something most supernatural. Throughout my deer sign studies, I felt as if I was treading in the footsteps of ghosts, buckskin-clad ghosts from a perilous but glorious area in our American past. In a way, this book is about them. Few of them could read or write, but what they knew about them, the greatest whitetail hunters the world has ever known, hasn't been written down. The words I write are their words. These words will seem new and strange to most whitetail hunters today, but none are actually new, only forgotten. The greatest meaning of whitetail deer signs presented in this book were once commonplace. They formed the language that is vital not only to the lives of the Native Americans who inhabited the untamed wilderness between the Atlantic coast and the Mississippi River for some 10,000 years, but to the birth and growth of our nation. Though the terms and concepts I use were hard-won and independent, wrenched from these wilds over much of the geographic range of North American white-tailed deer. But the pages of this book speak basically the same language, the language of the ghostly forms of our early American wilderness hunters. So they're not new, but they're new to you because they've been forgotten. And at one time, you know, when you lived off the land in this country, if you didn't understand those signs and you're living out in the wilderness somewhere, you could die of starvation. It was that important. You wouldn't get meat for your table. Most hunters nowadays don't understand that. When my father first started hunting, there were a lot of deer around the farm area where I grew up when I was young. It was no big deal for these guys to go walk out in the woods and shoot deer. But those deer in those days were just beginning to understand the importance of avoiding humans who use firearms to take whitetails. Those firearms were giving us an advantage. But over time, whitetails became adapted to them. And then to little things even, like back in the middle 1985 when tree stands came out. At that point, you know, in those first 5 to 10 years after tree stands became used by whitetail hunters all over the country, all kinds of deer walked just very close to the tree stands because they didn't know us hunters could perch in trees like we did. But gradually they learned to avoid tree stands, and then buck lures and all kinds of things. Nowadays they're getting used to get food plots used by hunters to attract deer. And all kinds of things. There's so many ways that our whitetails have learned to avoid hunters. Today, this means it's even more important, I think, that hunters understand whitetail signs like tracks and droppings and beds and antler rubs and ground scrapes and evidences of feeding, those kind of signs. Because if you understand them really well, you understand a lot about what those deer are doing in the woods during the hunting season. So let me just show you a couple examples. I can't go through all the deer signs there are in the world and explain them all here in a short little seminar like this. But For example, here's some tracks of a deer walking, alternating like that. And those tracks are about 18 inches apart. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you this deer is not alarmed. It's walking. It's not alarmed. This means that, let's say, when this deer was walking, it was going to a feeding area. Well, how do you know it's a feeding area? Because when it gets there and starts feeding, those tracks start going every which way and in different directions, zigzagging, and they're closer together, and they stop to feed on this and that, some grasses. They're feeding when those tracks are zigzagging. Isn't that something interesting to know? People are always asking me, how do you know where whitetails feed? Well, one of them, this isn't the only sign, there's other signs as well, but zigzagging tracks, and the tracks are closer together than 18 inches in a lot of places. That's a feeding area. How about that? Isn't that nice to know that? Next time you go in the woods, and especially if there's snow on the ground, then you find a place where tracks are going every which way. Well, if a whitetail's going somewhere, it's going to the feeding area, the tracks are zigzagging like this along a fairly straight line, along a deer trail. He's going somewhere, but he's not alarmed if those tracks are only about 18 inches apart. You can go further than this. You say, well, what kind of a deer made those tracks? Well, a basic thing that enables you to know what kind of a deer made those tracks is a simple thing, like little deer have little tracks. Medium-sized deer have medium-sized tracks. And great big deer, big bucks, which can weigh twice as much as a mature doe, they can be that much bigger, they have biggest tracks. Well, right away, you can walk through and say, oh, those little teeny 2-inch tracks, that's a fawn. Or if they're 3-inch tracks, they're the tracks of a doe or a yearling buck. Well, if those tracks are 3-inch tracks and there's some little 2-inch tracks along it, then you know those 3-inch tracks are made by a doe. If they're all alone, there's a good chance those tracks are made by a yearling buck. So, you see, then you come to other tracks, like say, anytime you find tracks that are 3 3/8 inch or longer, those are tracks of a buck. A buck from 2.5 all the way up to 6.5 years of age. So the big guys, the big bucks, they got tracks 4 inches long. Well, isn't that nice to know that? If you want to hunt big bucks, hunt where the big tracks are that are fresh. Well, okay, but that's step one. Now, one of the things that it's good to know too, the way you hunt determines how effective you're going to be. Well, that sounds like a simple thing to say, but if in the area where you hunt, you see a lot of tracks like this, the tracks are spaced like that. Here's a deer. A deer is bounding. When he's bounding, the first feet that touch ground, hoofs that touch ground, are these first two here. And he's going that way. First two here are the front feet. They hit the ground. And then the hind legs come forward, and they hit the ground ahead of it. And they're usually spread apart a little bit like that. And that's where he gets all the power for a bound. And big bucks at full speed can be bound 18 to 25 feet between bounds. And you see tracks that look like this in your hunting area, especially if you're a buck hunter. That's terrible. Because whenever a buck does this, create tracks like that, and a good distance apart like that, he's bounding. And almost always during hunting seasons, when a big buck is bounding, his tail is up, he's moving as fast as he can, he's gone for the hunting season. He's leaving the area in which he lives, and he won't be back till all the gunshots they don't hear gunshots anymore, and then they'll finally come back. When you hunt, you want tracks like this where you hunt. Where you hunt, you don't want tracks like that. Because once you get a buck to raise his tail, bound, and make big long leaps like that, he's gone for the season until the hunting season is over. So that makes a big difference in how effective you are at hunting. Once you can start reading tracks, now this is really basic stuff here that I just told you, but there are so much to learn about whitetail signs, like even antler rods and ground stripes. You might think you know all about those, but you don't. I guarantee you don't. There's so much more to know about those kind of deer signs, but at any rate, how do you take advantage of them? You might say, well, what I like to do is sneak around the woods, you know, and then stop and look around, see if I see any deer. Well, most of the time when you hunt like that, you probably will never see a really big buck, and if you do it, he'll be way over there running, and you see his tail, and that's the end of it, and he's gone for the season. You can empty the area you hunt within 1 or 2 days, wandering around in a square mile which this big buck lives, and he's gone for the season. Now, what I'm saying, I've been teaching hunters how to hunt older bucks, well, all deer, for a long, long time. And even before I started writing regularly as an outdoor writer back in 1980, I had guys come to my camp where my family and I hunted to ask me questions like, what does a whitetail feeding area look like? And what do those tracks mean? And things like that. And I used to take time to talk to them about those things. And that's one of the reasons I got started writing about these things. But in all the years I've been doing this, I've met two kinds of hunters. The one kind are the people that are curious. They want to learn. And I've always happened to teach people who want to learn. But I've also known it isn't so bad. My own father was one of these other kind. He used to say to me every now and then, especially when I was first beginning to do this kind of work, he says, you don't need to do all that stuff. I just go out and mosey around woods and I got hundreds of them. Well, he never got hundreds of them. But it was true. When he was younger, he didn't have to do any of those things. But all the while, I'd say the last 20 years I hunted with him, the number of the he-deer I could count in less than one hand. He didn't get many deer in those last years, but he kept insisting he knew all about hunting and all this other stuff I was doing was foolishness. You don't need to do that. I met some guys in the woods and I started telling them about things, and I had one guy roaring me out there. You could hear him in the next county. He probably says, if I don't see them, they aren't there. He was talking about bucks. There's no bucks here. The wolves ate them all. And I could say, look at those tracks right there. There's some 4-inch tracks. That's the biggest one of the biggest bucks living in there. That's BS. I don't believe that kind of stuff. If I don't see them, they aren't here. Well, don't believe people like, there's a lot of people, I get a letter every once in a while talking about what I'm going to talk about in my next seminar, about how you go about using the information you get from tracks and droppings and beds, all these deer signs, using them to more effectively hunt whitetail. You've got to be able to hunt without this happening, without those kind of tracks happening. And you can do it. And I have a lot of guys insist, oh, that's impossible. You can't do that. That won't work. You're just going to ruin your hunting area by doing things like that. Well, the truth of the matter is, people who say that probably can't use the hunting method I'm talking about. It's impossible for them to walk in the woods without alarming deer along the way. Hearing them crashing out, here's one snorting over that way. Those are the deer he sees. And they're going and he'll shoot 3-4 times at them, and maybe hoping he might hit one. But there's a lot of guys who can't do that kind of hunting. Or And they insist because they can't, nobody else can either. This is all nonsense when I'm telling you. Well, it's not nonsense. Now, if you want to be one of the kinds of people that can understand deer signs and then take really good advantage of it so you can start taking mature bucks almost every year, for example, then don't don't get too serious about what some of these older guys, like my dad, who I dearly loved, say about this sort of thing, because they can't do it, and they think nobody else can either. But that's not true. Because, for example, wolves have been doing what I'm going to be teaching you for 10,000 years. And my sons and I have been doing it since, well, before 1990, and it's really made a huge difference on the kind of deer we've been taking in the last 30-some years. So it can be that way for you too. So don't take those guys too seriously. There's a whole bunch of old guys. They all remember the old days. Remember all those drives? Man, the one back there by the Raby Ditch, man, always got a bunch of deer back there. But no antlers on them. No big antlers on them. Now they get yearling bucks, but no big antlers on them. I've been through that. I spent my first 15 years hunting with a bunch of guys like that, and we only got one buck in that 15 years that was worth having mounted, put on the wall. Only one. And so it doesn't have to be that way. So anyway, I want to get you used to the idea about things like that. So this is basic things about that. Speaking of that, I talked about this book. I spent a lot of time. There's over 100 different varieties of deer signs that are covered in this book. And once you know that, then you're ready to start buck hunting. If you know something from this book. I'm going to teach you what wolves have been doing and my sons have been doing all these years that has made it possible for us to take really good advantage of those deer signs like that. Knowing what these tracks and droppings and beds and all these other things mean, that makes it possible for us to hunt every day close to big bucks. Now, things have changed. They changed in my study area in 2018, when all of a sudden, it was getting warm enough. So our deer, which grew their winter coats, winter coats are fully formed by about the 1st of September, about the time bucks shed their velvet. Now they got their nice warm winter coats, but we've discovered since then, in our hunting, if the temperature is over 50 degrees during the day, they don't want to be moving around. They just want to lay around the shade somewhere where they won't be bothered. And that brought a new dimension into our deer hunting, which we've been working on since 2018, and now we've finally got to the point. We're really getting to be good at it. We're really getting to be good at hunting nocturnal deer. My next book, which I don't know when it's going to be out yet, but it's getting close. My 11th edition covers everything you need to know about hunting nocturnal deer. But it's not available yet, but we're getting there. But anyway, but even in that, this book teaches you how to take advantage of that kind of information you get from deer tracks well, so that you can start seeing more and more older bucks and other deer that you don't see. And I'll say this again. In every square mile of suitable habitat in America, and my wife and I have spent a lot of time traveling in the wintertime, different places around America. Spent a lot of time in Texas and New Mexico and Arizona, for example. And we got to know a bunch of deer down there really well. Same thing there. You don't see those big bucks unless you're able to take advantage of this kind of information with what you can learn from this one book. Or my 10th edition covers all kinds of things. You guys, the 10th edition is quite a bit different from my early books. These were, I used to publish these annually, covering subjects I learned during the previous year about whitetails. It might be one subject or two subjects, but it was basically about different aspects of whitetail habits and behavior and hunting. So anyway, this one covers everything. But along came unusually warm temperatures in November hunting season that really goofed things up, you know, and made deer nocturnal. And then in our hunting area, overabundant wolves as well. But we've been through that now. Now we're back on the trail of hunting big bucks again. So, well, but anyway, these two books, those two, that green one and that red one, are excellent for covering those subjects. Some of the earlier books that I wrote, like this was the very first one. And you know, I did a lot of interesting research there. I went through all kinds of information provided by the DNR in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and figured out, you know, hunter densities and how well they did and that kind of thing. And I quit doing that. That was a lot of extra work, but I figured out where your odds were best in in those two states to take trophy class bucks, among other things. We talked about hunting techniques and all. That was my very first one, the very first one of those books. And since, now, some of these others that have been out of print, these, and then there's a blue one that's been out of print too for quite a while. It's a 6th edition. But some of these other ones that have been out of print for a long time, John happened to find, going through some old storage, found some limited numbers of these three books. The 7th edition, which that one's got a complete section on how to build a hunting stool, like my boys and I use all the time. We use tree stands too, but not as near as much as we used to. And usually that's limited to opening weekend only. But we do a lot of ground level hunting and do it really well, because that's the way we keep close to big bucks every day we hunt. If you just sit one stand, within a day or two, every buck living in that surrounding square mile knows you're there and they're avoiding you already. You can sit there all season, they're avoiding you all season. You never see them. So, but by using a hunting stool and moving to a place where we find very fresh tracks, it's big, but not bounding ones, walking tracks. And they're really fresh, you know, like I say, maybe it's with a doe in heat and you see 3-inch tracks alongside of it and the buck is dragging his hoofs from track to track. Those are things that tell you, oh, this big buck is with a doe and she's in heat and that buck's gonna be with her for 24 to 26 hours. That's the length of time that doe is in heat. So you can't mess around. You say, oh, I'll go hunt there next week where I found those tracks. Way too late. You lost your chance there. You gotta hunt there today or tomorrow morning. And probably not much after that, because you don't know how long that doe's been in heat already. So anyway, some more ideas. But anyway, the 7th and the 6th, oh, there's the 6th. These cover different subjects, but like this one tells you how to build a stool of your own. It'll last you a lifetime. It'll become one of your most prized hunting tools for the rest of your life when you build one. But anyway, these particular books are available, the 1st, 6th, and 7th. No. And these are collector's items. You know, there are people that have spent $250 to up to $1,000 on eBay for that book. So there's a chance for you, the last chance for you to get these particular books. Well, anyway, the green one, that's the 8th edition. That covers the next subject of my next seminar. And the red book, the 4th edition, we talked about that today. That's a good one for all deer signs. So you learn those subjects and you're going to be much happier deer hunter in the future. To get those books that are out of print, you know, the first, the sixth, and the seventh, go to eBay, John's eBay, go to eBay and look up Whitetail Hunters Almanac and you'll get the information there from that, so, that you need to order those books. That's the subject for today. Now, if you enjoyed hearing what you heard today, give me a little break and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Take a minute and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and then also, if you liked it, check that thumbs up thing too, will you? Because that's important to me as a YouTube speaker. Do that for me, will you? And thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.